Hey folks, Mike with Chasing Trail here. Big reveal, I'm on the bike I bought yesterday. It is a 2007 DRZ400S with only 1,400 miles on it. This bike was a barn find that someone had bought. It'd been sitting for a long time, hardly ridden. On a ride with my dad, he is on the 300L behind me. We are headed out to Muletown Road. I don't think he's ridden this road in a long time. So first impressions of this bike compared to the 300L. It has noticeably more power. That should not be a surprise. For me, the power on this feels perfect. Where the 450 was a little too much, this one feels just right. Still exciting when you turn the throttle. Has some torque. I can cruise along at 60 or 65, no problem. I don't feel like I'm stressing the bike out. Vibrations aren't obnoxious. It feels very solid and planted. I don't think anything I'll say or comment on this bike is going to be some grand revelation that people haven't already talked about or don't already know. Before I bought the 300L, I was pretty much set on a DRZ400. And then kind of like right as I was really looking at cash in hand, I was trying to find a DRZ, the 300L Rally popped up. And I was very curious about that. It's a brand new bike. There's the whole fear of missing out thing. And so I said F it and went for the Rally. But ever since, I've had that thought in the back of my mind, wondering if the DRZ400 would have been better for me. So I'd been looking around for a while. I had talked myself into buying an expensive enduro that I really don't need. And then I saw this pop up. It was a good deal. And I thought, you know what? I need to try it. I'm going to stop here for a second, just make sure my dad's good. All good? Okay. So anyway, I saw this one pop up. It was a few hours away. I'd sworn I'd never drive out of town again for a used machine after being burned in the past. But I had talked to this guy for like an hour. He and I were getting along really well. We did a Zoom call. He showed me around the bike, did a cold start, all that stuff, so I felt pretty good about it. The thing is very clean. There's some grime here and there from where it sat. He said he cleaned it up as best he could. No big deal. Mechanically, everything looks good. Feels really good. Feels very solid. It's running really well. I do notice it almost has a power band, and I don't know if this is just... So this does have the 3x3 mod with a twin air filter and a Q4, FMF Q4 slip-on exhaust. And the dealership tuned the carb with those things in mind. It feels fine off idle. But once you get to mid-range, right there, it has a hit to it, like a power band. I'm carb tarded, so I couldn't tell you the reasons behind that. I don't know if that's just the CV carb, the way they work. I know there's a vacuum and a butterfly and some other stuff. Again, I'm carb tarded. So I don't know if that's how they all kind of feel, or if it's just the way it's tuned as it switches jets and the RPM range. But it definitely has a noticeable power band hit from mid to high RPM. It's actually kind of fun. Well, at least on the street. We'll see what that feels like in the dirt. I'll say this, overall I prefer fuel injection. It's just simple and it works. And as someone not familiar with carbs, I just feel better with FI. But carbs feel better. The connection to the machine, the instantaneous throttle response, No jerky on-off sensation. Carbs feel better to use. I mean, I should say the throttle response feels much better. I hate the on-off nature of fuel injection. The 450 was awful with it, even with the vortex. Well, that's hyperbole. It was bad still, even with the vortex and the throttle tamer. The 300L is much better, but I think that's largely just because it has so little power that you don't notice it as much. It's still there. So riding a carved bike is really refreshing. It just feels much nicer in that regard. I'm sure as soon as I have an issue with the carb, I will swear and vow to never ride a carved machine again. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, noticeable power band hit. This bike feels a little more raw. It's just a little more primitive. It's not a bad thing. It's different. It's surprisingly smooth. I mean, I can feel some vibes, but they're not bad. They're not making anything tingle. I kind of like it. I like knowing I'm on a machine. I don't like bikes when they're too smooth, or you can't even tell they're running. It's one thing I liked with the older BMW Boxers. You could, you know, they shook a little bit. When you give them some gas, they torque when you're at a stop. My new 1250 is almost too smooth. Yeah, this thing will just, it's got a noticeable amount of torque. All right, here we are hitting the dirt. Very curious to see how this thing feels. It feels small compared to the 300. That's probably just an illusion because the 300's sparing. But I definitely feel like I'm on a smaller bike. Oh yeah, this thing will break the back wheel loose. No problem. Oh yeah. This thing is fun. It's a ripper. Whoa! Hang on! She's getting squirrely. Suspension feels really good. Very plush. Just soaking all the stuff up. Rear tire locks up, no problem. There's not a lot of feel to the rear brake though. Let's try that again. Yeah, it's definitely working, you just can't really feel it. All good? So I know comparing the Rally to the DRZ isn't a straight comparison. The standard 300L would be a better comparison, but this is what I got. So the Rally was more interesting to me and that platform than the standard was. Oh, more water. Shit. When in doubt, throttle it out. I gotta be careful. If you hit the throttle and this, it goes. The 300L is definitely tamer. Easier to make a mistake here. Which way do you want to go? You want more dirt or straight?
Up to you.
Let's go this way then. I really want to fill this thing out in the dirt, so we're going to take the dirty route. Ooh, that was some chop. Oh, little puddle. Shit. Yeah, this thing rips. I do not need any more power than this machine has, I can tell you. For my riding ability, this is more than enough. but it provides that fun factor in the way the 300L cannot. Not suggesting in any way that the 300L is a bad machine. They're different. There's going to be pros and cons. One of the pros to this is the power. It's definitely got it, and it's noticeable. Throttle response when going slow is so nice with the carb. None of that jerky bullshit I get with FI. I'm really hoping that this stock suspension will be enough for my fat ass. We'll see once I hit some water bars at the dam, whether it bottoms or not. I'm a little more hunched than I'd like to be standing. I'm really having to reach down to the bars, so I may have to raise those slightly. This thing's giving me a little bit of arm pump. Well, I can tell you this is a really fun bike, especially for the price you can get these for. I know it's harder these days. Used market's pretty inflated like everything else, but you can still get these considerably cheaper than you can any other new bike. The stock suspension's very good, at least as good as my 300L is after putting money in the 300L. The power is noticeably stronger, very noticeably. However, just initial impressions, that's probably the only two areas where I like this better than the 300L. The 300L is refined, modern, predictable. It's a fantastic all-around bike, but you have to address the suspension unless you weigh like 140 pounds, and it will never have the power that this thing does, and it's more expensive, probably, depending where you are and what kind of deal you can get. Here in California, you ain't getting deals. I see the prices people get bikes in other parts of the country, and it just blows me away. I'm fortunate in the part of state I'm in the far north that dealers don't do much, if any, ADM, but down in Southern California, they're charging people an arm and a leg an extra $1,000, $2,000. I'm not even talking about like tax, freight, assembly, that kind of shit. They're just straight up saying, we're just charging more for this bike because we can. I had a little sympathy for them when inventory was so short that they only got a handful of bikes. You're going to have to charge more to keep the lights on if you're only selling a few bikes a month. When I'm seeing these really high volume dealers that are still getting bikes doing that shit, it's a bummer. Supply and demand though, they're doing it because people are willing to pay it. If inflation keeps going the way it is, I don't know how many people are going to afford to be able to buy stuff much longer. It's getting crazy. I have not seen the fan come on this thing yet, so either this banged up radiator is working fine or the fan doesn't work. Don't know which yet. One side of the radiator got pushed in probably before these guards were put on it, and there's a whole row of fins that are basically crumpled and then just some kind of bent up here and there. I was wondering if you might be able to see even through there where it took the hit and everything's kind of wonky. It has this Fluidyne cap on top. I know Fluidyne makes a nice radiator for the 400E, so I don't know if this was replaced or if it's stock and just has that cap or what. How do you like it?
motorcycle's fine. My riding ability is not the same as it once was.
Oh. Well, what do you want to do from here? Having a little trouble feeling the gear shifts through my boots. Brakes are okay. Nothing to write home about. Around 55 to 60 miles an hour, this thing feels awesome. Really planted. Plenty of power if I needed to pass somebody. So that's one thing I don't like of the 300L, is just a lack of passing power. Here I know I still have plenty on tap. I could get around somebody, no problem. I like that. I expected to see a lot of motorcycles today. It's a perfect day. Sunny. Gonna have a high of 71 today. Hard to believe it's January. Hukalach did suggest a little drag race just to compare. So I find a straight bit of road here, we might do that. Yeah, leaves the 300 in the dust. No surprise there. 300 did decent though. Based on that sign, my speedometer is about 4 miles an hour optimistic. Front brakes work, but they're not strong by any means. I really like the Q4 pipe on this DRZ. It's got a nice note, but it's not obnoxious. I've complained about the brakes a little bit on the 300L. Not that they didn't work, but that you have to, the front, I mean, you have to grab pretty hard. I will say it feels like it has better stopping power than this. I cannot feel my upshifts at all. It's a strange feeling. There's no feedback. Maybe it's just my boots. Today is really just a first impressions ride. Way too early for me to say, oh, this bike's better or that bike's better. Just giving some thoughts. I will do this little thought experiment. If someone showed up and said, with a gun, they're like, you can only keep one of these bikes. You can either keep the 300L Rally or you can keep the DRZ400, and we'll give you the cash difference back in terms of what you saved on the Rally. And at this point, this DRZ was less than half of what I have invested in the Rally. The only other things I'd want to do to this DRZ is a bigger gas tank and a seat, most likely. I don't think it's going to need anything else. So far, the suspension feels really good, although we'll see after some water bar little jumps. And the carb feels fine. I was thinking I might need to put a pumper carb on it, but now I don't know if that's true. So anyway, back to my thought experiment. They said you can only keep one bike, the 300L Rally or the DRZ, plus we'll give you cash difference in price. In other words, I could keep the DRZ plus the money difference. What would I pick? I'd pick the 300L Rally. I'm not saying it's the better bike. I'm saying right now, after my first real ride on this one, initial impressions, amount I've spent, etc., just as a thought experiment, that's what I would do. I like the 300L Rally a lot. It's a great bike. This is also a great bike. And was a hell of a lot less money. And it's fun in a different way. All motorcycles are fun. I don't love the brakes on this, I'll tell you right now.